Well, now, the thing about the third day, the word Shavuot in Hebrew actually means weeks, or sevens, counting sevens, counting 7 sevens, actually, and it culminates in the day known as Pentecost. Well, Pentecost is a Greek word. Cost is where we get the word count. Like, what's something cost? How many dollars do I count out? And the word penta, like pentagram, pentagon, is 50. So the word Pentecost literally means count 50. So is Pentecost, is Shavuot simply the 50th day? Or is Shavuot the feast counting 50 days? If it's counting 50 days, then technically the festival of Shavuot starts with day 1, which is Bikurim, which is where the priest takes the first cut of the harvest and lifts it up to the Creator and says, here we acknowledge that you're the giver of our food. You've brought forth the fruit from the earth. We're acknowledging you for it. Start counting 50 days. It's not working so well? Okay. Is it reading okay? It's just that when it's in the ear, it's... Okay. Okay, anyway. So, just for the record, every single list of the festivals I've ever seen don't tell you this. This is completely different. Every list of the festivals I've seen, Bikurim is the third festival, Shavuot is the fourth, the fourth festival. I'm telling you this for a reason. I'm telling you this because this looks like the pattern to me, and I'm going to try to prove it with the alphabet. So no matter where, whether encyclopedias, dictionaries, Bibles, Jewish studies, Christian studies, I've never seen them say this. But anyway, the gestation period is counting the 50 days. It's a process of counting. Now, if you look close at Acts chapter 2, where the disciples were met together in the upper room, what were they doing when as the story goes, the Holy Spirit fell, there was tongues of fire on their head, the sound of a mighty rushing wind? What were they in the middle of doing? Does anybody know offhand? Tarrying. They're not just tarrying, they were doing something specific if you read close in the story. They were talking about the wonderful things that Elohim, translated in English as God, Gimel Dalet, we won't go there anymore, we'll call him Elohim or Yahweh or the Creator or the Almighty. They were talking about the wonderful things He had done. They were rehearsing and thinking over, contemplating, cogitating, reminding each other of the great stories that He had been doing for them. So, if one would say, well, how should we regard these festivals? And I'm pausing here for a reason on these first 3 festivals. It's because He tells us how to regard these festivals. They're not just arbitrary behaviors, but He says, okay, for Pesach, He told them what to do. Kill the lamb, put the blood, stay in your house, and then He tells them how to observe that later. And so the traditional Jewish Seder is what they have made out of that, which is a whole other story, but we won't go there exactly. The festival of unleavened bread, He says, take all the leavening out of your house. There shall not be found one speck, one crumb of leavened bread in your house for 7 days. 7 days. Now, here's the other thing. Traditionally, what the Jews do, which again, people can do whatever they want, I'm just telling you what I see, but what they do is that they call these 2 festivals either Pesach or the Festival of Unleavened Bread. They don't necessarily distinguish them as 2 festivals. Check out for yourself Leviticus 23. That whole chapter tells you about the festivals. It looks to me like Pesach is a 1-day festival. Chag Matzot is 7 days. Shavuot is 50 days. The point is, for 7 days, you don't have leavening in your house. Can you have leavening on that day? That's another story. That's a whole other debate. We won't go there. But the question is, if it says don't have leavening in your house for 7 days, that's one thing. Is this the day that you take the leavening out or make sure that it's out? Typically in the Jewish Seder, they'll have a little ceremony where the kids go one last time during the meal, and they look around, and one of them comes back with something, and maybe the grandmother, whoever it is, will basically sweep it up and take it out. So there's something during the Seder itself where they're taking out the last little bit of leavening. But for these 7 days, no leavening is in your house. And the scriptures tell us why. It says, so that, this is in the writings, Yahweh says, so that the Torah will be in your mouth. You can say, wait a second, what does taking leavening out of my house as a ceremonial, archaic custom that when Jesus died on the cross he did away with it, what has that got to do with the Torah being in my mouth? I'm obviously mixing stories here. First of all, I don't think he ever did away with it. Second of all, it's a perversion to think that anything could do away with what he said to do. And third of all, if we try to mix Christological doctrine with Torah instruction, we've already run into trouble. And there's no sense trying to unscramble that. The word of Yud-He-Vav-He, the creator of heaven and earth, said to his people Israel, you will take the leaven out of your house for a week, and don't let any leaven be in your mouth, so that my word, the Torah, will be in your mouth. It all goes back to the meaning of the kaf, the symbol that represents that event. So, gestation and the birth, you might say, of the harvest, the first harvest. Mem, the letter, has to do with gestation. Mem is a womb. It speaks of birthing. So here you have a normal letter, mem, which has to do with, basically, it's a picture of an open womb. See, there's an opening here, versus the closed mem, where there is no opening. So, mem speaks of giving birth. So gestation is the closed womb where something is growing and developing, and nun is that one who was the seed that was gestating and becoming, leaps out and becomes its own living entity. So there's you might say, a main event between these two letters. This, as I said before the break, this is the environment, and this is the one in the environment. This is the fish, that's the water. This is the one born, that's the place where it has been developing. Shavuot, 50 days. So these two letters basically have to do with the water stuff. These two letters have to do with the laver, the altar sacrifice, and these three have to do with that, and I'll explain that here. The yod is the hand that makes. It's the hand that grabs a tool. It's the hand that then speaks of the artist, or the architect, or the draftsman, the one who designs stuff, the creator. The yod is the hand of the creator who says, I will make this. I am making this. I'm doing this. And at the yod, at the end of a word, means my. So, ami, if you write it in English, you'd have like A-M-I. In Hebrew, it would be ayin mem yod. You could also have an aleph mem. That means people also. But this ami is a close-knit family group of people. This is kinsmen or brethren. Ami means my kinsman. So anytime you add the yod at the end, it means my. So the creator, the artist, who invents something and then signs his name and says, this is mine, that's all yod things, yod stuff. Yod stuff is making and calling it your own. Taking responsibility for, taking authorship of. So, the 4 colors on the door of the Mishkan. We're having a little bit of a discussion about this earlier. And blue, purple, red, and white linen, which is the fence all around. So typically you'd have maybe your name on the door, or you certainly say who it belongs to. What could this mean? So we were discussing at the break there, and one suggestion was, well, blue is kind of like sky, purple is kind of like royalty, red is kind of like blood, and white is kind of like purity. Pretty basic color equivalences. Okay, so in the commandment to wear tzitzit, or fringes, like this type of a thing, the Creator said, "You will tie for yourselves fringes to wear on the corners of your garment that covers you. You will tie them, and when you look at them, you will remember my words. And the fringes you tie will have one blue thread." Now, typically, traditionally, the Jews just wear white. Why? Well, the story goes that when they basically when they were kicked out of the land in the diaspora, the sea creature that was either a snail or like a squid that they got the blue dye from, it's called techilit, it's a blue color or kind of a purpley color, it ceased to be. So because they were kicked out of the land as a kind of a picture of woe, they don't use the blue thread. Well, but I also heard a story, I can't validate it, but once they got back to the land in like the 60s, 1960s, there it is again, washed up on the shore, the creature's back. They could be using blue, but rabbinically, I guess, they don't do blue. They just have the white tyings. Well, now it didn't say it had to be white thread, but it was made out of linen. So one reason for making them in colors is just for, that's one other thing, but it's not rabbinical. The rabbinical method is white threads tied, and what they do is they take seven, they take these various threads, and they'll tie a knot, and then they'll do a winding, and they might wind the thread around first maybe 10 times, and then another knot, and then another winding where you take the thread and wrap it around 5 times, and then another knot, another winding where you wind the thread around 6 times, another knot, and then wind it around 5 times, and then another knot, and then they have the fringes. You can say, well, what's the big deal about that? Or the other way to do it is, I think it's 7, 8, 11, and 13. And if you count those numbers up, you got 15, you got 26, you got, if I'm thinking right, you got 39. Yeah, well, doesn't matter. The point is, the windings denote letters. And so if you have 10 letters, 10 wrappings, that means the 10th letter, which happens to be the yod. 5 wrappings is the 5th letter, which happens to be the hey. 6 windings is the vav, and 5 windings is the hey again. So if you have a tzitzi, which means that which flies, like just something dazzling, sparkling, and bright, that's wrapped with the numbers 10, 5, 6, 5, it's the name of the Almighty. Moses, in Exodus chapter 3, he's at the burning bush, and he says to the Almighty, who's speaking to him through bush, he says, who are you? And he says, Ayah, Asher Ayah.